The night my mother shut the door on me, I was still wearing my school uniform. I remember standing there, frozen, my bag hanging from one shoulder, listening to the sound of the lock turning from the inside. That sound was quiet, but it echoed inside me for years. I was 14 years old when my mother told me to leave the house. Not tomorrow. Not after things cooled down. Not when someone could come get me. Right then. People think moments like that are loud. They imagine shouting, screaming, chaos. But this moment was calm. Too calm. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She didn't even look angry. She just looked tired. And somehow, that hurt more. Let me take you back. Before that night, our house already felt small. Not because of the walls, but because of the silence. My father had left years earlier. No dramatic goodbye. No explanation. One day he was there. The next day he wasn't. After that, it was just me and my mother. People would say, "At least you have each other." But they didn't see what home really felt like. My mother worked long hours. She came home exhausted, her face tight with stress. When I tried to talk to her, she would nod without listening. When I asked questions, she sighed. When I needed comfort, she changed the subject. I learned early that emotions were not welcome in our house. Bills were welcome, silence was welcome, but feelings, those were a problem. At 14, I was still a child. I still needed guidance. I still needed reassurance. I still believed a mother would protect, child no matter what. I didn't know yet how wrong I was. The trouble started slowly. Bad grades, late nights, a teacher calling home. Nothing serious, nothing criminal, just the normal mess of a teenager trying to figure life out. But in my mother's eyes, every mistake felt like a personal attack. She would say things like, "I can't deal with this anymore. You're becoming just like your father. I didn't sign up for this." Each word landed heavier than the last. The day everything changed started like any other. School was rough. I got into trouble for talking back to a teacher. I didn't think it was a big deal. But when I got home, my mother was already angry. Someone had called her from the school. She stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, staring at the wall like she was holding herself together. I tried to explain. She didn't let me finish. Her voice was flat when she spoke. "I'm done," she said. I laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because it didn't make sense. "Done with what?" I asked. She turned to look at me, and for a second, I thought I saw sadness in her eyes. But then it disappeared. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "You're not listening, you're not changing, you're ruining everything." I told her I would do better. I promised, I begged. I reminded her I was only 14. That's when she said the words I will never forget. "Then you shouldn't be here." The room went silent. I waited for her to take it back, to say she didn't mean it. She didn't. She walked to my room, grabbed a small bag, and threw my clothes inside. "Pack what you need," she said. "You have to go." My hands were shaking. I asked where I was supposed to go. She shrugged. "That's not my problem anymore." That sentence broke something inside me. Not anger, not rage, something colder, something final. I packed slowly, hoping she would stop me. She didn't. I walked to the door. She opened it. Cold air rushed in from outside. For a moment we just stood there. I looked at her face, searching for any sign of doubt. There was none. When she closed the door, she didn't slam it. She closed it carefully. Like she was protecting the house from me. The lock clicked, and that was it. I stood there for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just stared at the door, waiting for it to open again. It never did. That night, I slept on a bench near a bus stop. The city sounded different when you didn't belong anywhere. Cars passed. People walked by. No one looked at me. I was invisible. And somehow, that felt worse than being thrown out. I kept checking my phone. No messages, no missed calls. Nothing. Every few minutes I told myself, she'll call. She has to. Hours passed. The screen stayed dark. By morning I realized something that terrified me. She wasn't coming back for me. This wasn't a lesson. This wasn't a threat. This was a decision. At 14 I learned something no child should ever learn. That love can have conditions. That family can walk away. That sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the first to leave. But what I didn't know then was that this night would shape everything. Every choice I made, every wall I built, every success I would later achieve, and years later, the same woman who shut that door would stand in front of me and beg. The morning after my mother locked me out, I woke up before the sun, not because I wanted to, because the cold wouldn't let me sleep anymore. The bench was hard. My back ached, my neck felt stiff. For a few seconds I forgot where I was. Then reality hit me all at once. I wasn't late for school. I wasn't rushing to get ready. I wasn't about to hear my mother's footsteps in the kitchen. I was outside, alone, and no one was coming. People talk about survival like it's something heroic, like it's strength and courage and bravery. But real survival starts with fear. Pure, quiet fear. Fear that creeps into your chest and stays there. Fear that whispers, "What now?" I checked my phone again. Still nothing. No message from my mother. No apology. No question asking where I was. That silence told me everything. She meant it. I stood up and looked around. The city was waking up. People were heading to work. Parents walked with their kids' backpacks bouncing behind them. I watched a boy about my age laugh with his mother as she fixed his collar. I turned away. That scene felt too painful to look at. I didn't know where to go. I had no plan, no money, no shelter, no adult to protect me. I was 14, carrying a small bag that felt heavier with every step. I thought about calling my mother again. My finger hovered over her name. Then I remembered her voice. That's not my problem anymore. I put the phone away. The first place I went was my school. It felt safe, familiar. I figured if I stayed there long enough, someone would notice something was wrong. Teachers were arriving. Students filled the halls. For a few hours I pretended everything was normal. I sat in class. I opened my notebook. I nodded when spoken to. But inside, my mind was screaming. By lunchtime, reality caught up with me. I didn't have lunch money. I didn't have a place to go after school. I didn't have a home to return to. A teacher pulled me aside. She said I looked tired. She asked if everything was okay at home. I almost told her. The words sat right at the edge of my mouth. But fear stopped me. Fear of what would happen next. Fear of being taken somewhere worse. Fear of making things official. So I lied. "I'm fine," I said. She nodded. And let me go. That was the moment I learned something important. If you don't speak up, the world assumes you're okay. That afternoon, I walked the streets until my legs hurt. I watched shops close their doors. I watched daylight fade. I still didn't know where I would sleep. I thought about friends, but I was ashamed. How do you tell someone your own mother threw you out? How do you explain that you have nowhere to go? Eventually, I knocked on one door, a friend's house. His mother opened the door and smiled when she saw me. But when she asked why I was there so late, my voice broke. I told her everything. She didn't hesitate. She let me in. That night, I slept on a couch. It wasn't my bed, but it was warm and safe. I cried silently into a pillow, trying not to make a sound. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I moved from couch to couch. Some people helped, some people asked questions, some people looked uncomfortable. I learned quickly who truly cared and who didn't. My mother never called, not once. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months, still nothing. People asked about her. "Does your mom know you're here? Is this temporary? Did you two fight?" I didn't know how to answer, because the truth sounded unbelievable. At school, things got harder. My grades dropped. I was exhausted all the time. I stopped talking as much. I started disappearing into myself. Late at night, I thought about that door closing. I replayed it again and again. What if I had said something different? What if I had stayed quiet? What if I had begged harder? But deep down, I knew something painful. This wasn't about one mistake. She had already made her choice. One night, lying awake on another couch, I made a decision. If my own mother didn't want me, I would survive without her. That thought scared me, but it also gave me strength. I realized no one was coming to save me, so I would have to save myself. I started working small jobs, cleaning, helping neighbors, anything that paid a little. I learned the value of money quickly. Every coin mattered, every meal mattered, every place to sleep mattered. At 14, I grew up fast, too fast. I stopped expecting kindness. I stopped trusting easily. I stopped believing adults always knew best, but something else started growing inside me, determination. I promised myself something quietly in the dark. One day, I would build a life so strong that no one could throw me out of it. I didn't want revenge back then. Not yet. I just wanted to prove that I could survive, that I wasn't weak, that I wasn't a burden. Months passed. Still no word from my mother, no birthday message, no holiday call, nothing. It was like I had never existed. That silence hurt more than the door ever did, because it told me she wasn't struggling with her choice. She was comfortable with it, but what she didn't know was that every cold night, every silent tear, every moment of hunger was shaping me into someone she would no longer recognize. I didn't know it then, but this was only the beginning. The pain was planting something deep inside me, something that would grow, something that would one day stand face to face with her. And when that day came, she would finally understand what it means to lose a child. By the time I turned 15, I was no longer a child. Not because I wanted to grow up, but because life didn't give me a choice. When you don't know where you'll sleep next week, you stop dreaming like a kid. You start thinking like someone who has to survive. I learned how to read people quickly, who meant what they said, who only pretended to care, who would help once but never twice. Every couch had rules. Don't eat too much. Don't stay too long. Don't make noise. Don't get too comfortable. Because comfort was temporary. I stopped unpacking my bag. There was no point. Everything I owned stayed folded, ready to move again. School became background noise. Not because I didn't care, but because my mind was always somewhere else. I was thinking about money, about work, about how not to be a problem. Teachers saw me as distant. Classmates saw me as quiet. No one saw the war happening inside me. Some nights when everyone else was asleep, I would stare at the ceiling and ask myself one question. How did it come to this? I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't dangerous. I wasn't hopeless. I was just unwanted. I finally found a small, steady place to stay. An older woman my friend knew. She had a spare room. Nothing fancy, just a mattress and a lamp. But she didn't ask many questions. And sometimes, that's the greatest kindness of all. In exchange, I helped around the house, cleaned, carried groceries, did small repairs. I didn't complain. I was grateful. That was the first time in months. I slept without fear of being asked to leave the next morning. And in that silence, something changed inside me. I stopped waiting for my mother. Stopped checking my phone every hour. Stopped hoping for an apology. Not because it stopped hurting, but because hope was too painful to carry anymore. I told myself she had made her choice. And now, I was making mine. I focused on one thing: independence. I took every job I could, early mornings, late nights. I learned how to speak confidently, even when I was scared. How to smile when I wanted to scream. How to hide hunger behind jokes. Money stopped being numbers, it became safety. Every paycheck meant one less night of fear. At 16, I rented my first tiny room. The walls were thin, the floor creaked, but the door locked from the inside. That mattered more than anything. I remember standing in that room alone and laughing quietly to myself. Not because I was happy, but because I had done something no one thought I could. I had survived. Still, the pain didn't disappear. It just changed shape. Sometimes it came back as anger, sometimes as sadness, sometimes as emptiness. I would see mothers and sons arguing in public. I would hear someone complain about their parents, and something inside me would tighten, because they didn't know. They didn't know how lucky they were. I never talked about my mother, not because I was protecting her, but because I didn't want to explain her absence. Explaining felt like reliving it. Years passed. I grew taller, stronger, quieter. People said I was mature for my age. They didn't know maturity came from loss. At 18, I graduated. There was no one waiting in the crowd for me. No hugs, no photos, no proud smile. Just me, standing alone, holding a piece of paper that proved I had made it this far. That night, I sat on my bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought about calling my mother, just to tell her, just to say I didn't fail. But I didn't, because part of me wondered, would she even care? That question scared me more than the answer. Life moved forward. College, work, new cities. I built a routine. I built walls. I built a version of myself that didn't need anyone. From the outside, I looked fine. Successful, even. But inside, there was still that 14-year-old kid, standing in front of a closed door. Sometimes, late at night, memories would return. Her face, her voice, the calm way she said, "You have to go." I wondered if she ever thought about me, if she ever felt guilt, if she ever missed me. But years went by, and still, nothing. Eventually I stopped wondering, because wondering kept me tied to the past, and I was tired of being tied to anything that hurt. I focused on building something solid, a career, a name, a future. I worked harder than anyone around me. Not because I loved work, but because I was afraid of losing everything again. Success didn't come overnight, but slowly it came. People started respecting me, listening to me, depending on me. And every time someone said, "You did this on your own," something inside me felt both proud and broken. Because they were right. I did it on my own, but I never should have had to. Still, I didn't hate my mother. Not yet. Hate requires energy. And all my energy went into surviving. I told myself the past was behind me, that I had moved on, that I was stronger now. I didn't know that the past was quietly waiting, that one day it would knock on my door, just like I once knocked on hers, and when it did, everything I thought I had buried would come back to the surface. For a long time, my life stayed quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after you've learned not to expect anything from anyone. I had a job, I had a routine, I had a place that was mine. From the outside it looked like stability. From the inside it felt like control. And control was something I had never had before. I woke up early every day, not because I loved mornings, but because discipline felt safer than chaos. I planned everything. My work hours, my expenses, my future. I left no room for surprises, because surprises had a way of destroying things. People around me started to notice. They said I was focused, driven, serious. Some admired it, some found it intimidating, but none of them knew the reason behind it. They didn't know that deep inside me lived a fear I never spoke about, the fear of being thrown away again. I didn't talk about family. When people asked, I kept my answers short. My mother and I don't talk. It's complicated. We went separate ways. Those words sounded calm. But every time I said them, something twisted inside my chest. Years passed without a single message from her. No apology, no explanation, no curiosity. It was as if cutting me off had been easy, effortless. That thought hurt more than anger ever could. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered what she told people. Did she say I ran away? Did she say I was ungrateful? Did she erase me from her story completely? I would never know. And maybe that was the hardest part. As my life grew bigger, my past felt smaller. I moved to a better place. I earned more money. I started being invited into rooms where decisions were made. People listened when I spoke. They trusted me. They respected me. But respect felt strange, because the one person whose respect I once wanted the most had decided I wasn't worth keeping. I told myself I didn't care anymore, and most days that was true. But then something small would happen. A smell, a song, a phrase someone said without thinking. And suddenly I was 14 again, standing in the cold, waiting. I never spoke about that night. Not to friends, not to partners, not even to myself. I locked it away, because opening it felt dangerous. Then one day, something changed. It started as a rumor. Someone at work mentioned a name, my mother's name. I froze. I told myself it was a coincidence. But my body reacted before my mind could. My heart started racing. My hands felt cold. I didn't say anything. I listened. Apparently she'd been asking about me, quietly, carefully. After all these years. At first I didn't believe it. Why now? Why after so much time? Why after so much silence? The thought followed me home. It sat with me in the dark. It whispered questions I didn't want to answer. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because something old had been disturbed. Something I thought was buried. A few days later, I received a message A simple one, from a number I hadn't seen in years. It said, "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen. For a long time, that was it. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of the past. Just a request. Anger rose inside me. Sharp, hot. How could she ask that? After everything? After years of pretending I didn't exist? I didn't reply. Not that day. Not the next. I wanted her to feel what I had felt. The uncertainty, the silence. But as days passed, something unexpected happened. Curiosity. I wanted to know why. Why now? What had changed? What made her remember me after all this time? Part of me wanted to delete the message. Part of me wanted to send a long reply. But the strongest part of me wanted to stay silent. Because silence had become my shield. Then the messages kept coming. Short ones. Careful ones. I just want to explain. I know I hurt you. Please. Each message felt like a knock on the door. The same door she had once closed on me. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not softness. Power. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one begging. I wasn't the one standing outside. She was. I thought about everything I had built. Everything I had survived. Everything I had lost. And I realized something important. Talking to her wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. I agreed to meet. Not because I missed her. Not because I wanted closure. But because I wanted answers. The day of the meeting arrived. I chose the place. A public cafe. Neutral ground. Somewhere safe. Somewhere controlled. I arrived early, sat at a table near the window. I watched people walk by. Families, couples, strangers with lives I would never know. Then she walked in. Older, smaller, different, but still her. Our eyes met. For a moment neither of us moved. Time stretched. 14 years collapsed into seconds. She looked nervous, uncertain, like someone who knew they had no right to be there. She sat down across from me. Her hands were shaking. Mine was steady. That's when I realized how much had changed. She opened her mouth to speak, and then she stopped. Tears filled her eyes. "I never thought you'd come," she said. I didn't answer. I just looked at her, waiting. She took a deep breath. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. Those words hung in the air, heavy, fragile. But they weren't enough. Not yet. Because some mistakes don't fade with time. They grow, they wait, and they demand to be faced. And as I sat there, listening to her struggle for words, I knew this conversation was only the beginning, not the end, because what she didn't know yet was that I wasn't the same child she had thrown out, and the truth she was about to hear would leave her speechless. She kept looking at me like she was searching for something familiar, like she expected to see the same scared 14-year-old who once stood outside her door. But that boy was gone, and she could feel it. We sat there in silence for a few seconds. The cafe was loud around us, cups clinking, people laughing, music playing softly in the background. But at our table, everything felt still, heavy. "I don't even know where to start," she said. Her voice sounded weaker than I remembered. Not strict, not sharp, just tired. I didn't help her. I didn't nod. I didn't encourage her. I just waited. Because for once, the waiting wasn't mine to carry. She finally spoke again. "I was overwhelmed back then," she said. "I didn't know how to handle everything. I was alone. I was scared. I listened. But inside me, something stayed calm. Those words sounded familiar, too familiar. She kept talking. She said she felt abandoned by my father. She said she felt trapped. She said she felt like she was drowning. And somehow, she said I reminded her of everything that went wrong. That was when I felt it. Not anger. Clarity. "So you pushed me out," I said quietly. She flinched. "I didn't mean it like that," she said quickly. "But that's what you did," I replied. My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It just existed. She lowered her eyes. "I thought you'd be okay," she said. "I thought someone would take you in." I leaned back in my chair and finally spoke the truth. "I slept on a bench that night," I said. Her head snapped up. "What?" she whispered. "I was 14, I continued. I had nowhere to go, no plan, no money. Her lips trembled. "I didn't know," she said. I looked straight at her. "You didn't ask." That sentence hit harder than any accusation, because it was simple and undeniable. I told her everything. Not dramatically, not angrily, just honestly. The couches, the hunger, the fear, the nights I waited for her call, the days I stopped hoping. Her breathing became uneven. Tears slid down her face. But I didn't stop, because the first had stopped protecting her feelings a long time ago. "You didn't just throw me out," I said. "You erased me." She shook her head. "I thought you hated me," she whispered. I almost laughed. "Hate takes energy," I said. "I was too busy surviving." She covered her face with her hands. People at nearby tables glanced over. I didn't care. For years, my pain had been invisible. Now it finally had a witness. "I regret it every day," she said through tears. I believed her, but belief didn't change the past. "Why now?" I asked. That was the question that mattered. She hesitated. Then she spoke words I wasn't prepared for. "I'm sick," she said. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet confession. Time slowed. The noise of the cafe faded. She explained, long treatments, uncertain outcomes, lonely nights. And then she said the part that made everything click. "I didn't want to leave this world without fixing what I broke." There it was. The reason. She hadn't reached out because she missed me. She hadn't reached out because she finally understood. She reached out because she was afraid. I felt something twist inside me. Not anger. Disappointment. "I'm not your unfinished business," I said softly. Her eyes filled again. "I know," she said. I didn't know who else to turn to. I thought about all the nights I had no one to turn to. All the times I was scared and alone. All the moments I needed a mother. And she wasn't there." "You had years," I said. "Years to ask how I was. Years to apologize. Years to care." She nodded. "I was ashamed," she said. "Shame didn't stop you from sleeping in your bed," I replied. Silence fell between us. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't yelling. But every word carried weight, because it was earned. She reached across the table. I pulled my hand back. That small movement said more than words ever could. "I'm not here for forgiveness," I said. "I'm here for the truth." She nodded slowly. "I chose myself," she said. Those words surprised me, because for the first time, she wasn't hiding. "I chose my comfort," she continued, "my peace, my fear." She looked at me, "And I left you to deal with the consequences." That honesty hurt more than excuses, because it confirmed what I had always felt. I took a deep breath. "I became who I am because I had no choice," I said, "not because you pushed me to be better." She nodded again. "I know." Then she said something unexpected. "I don't deserve to be part of your life," she said. That stopped me. "I just wanted to see you," she continued. "To know you're okay. To tell you I'm sorry." For the first time I felt something soften. Not forgiveness, but understanding. I looked at her carefully. She looked older, smaller, weaker, but still human, still flawed. "I am okay," I said, and I meant it. She smiled through tears. "That's all I hoped for." We sat there quietly. Two people connected by blood, separated by choices. I stood up. She looked surprised. "Is this goodbye?" she asked. I paused. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Today was necessary." She nodded. "I won't push," she said. "I've done enough of that." I walked away. Each step felt heavy, but also freeing. Outside, the air felt different, lighter. I realized something important as I stood there. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to hurt her. The truth had already done that. She had to live with her choices. And I had learned to live without her. But this story wasn't over yet. Because life has a way of testing what we think we've healed. And soon, I would face the hardest choice of all. After I walked away from that cafe, I didn't feel relief the way I thought I would. I felt quiet. Not empty, not angry. Just quiet. Like a storm had passed, but the air hadn't settled yet. I walked for a long time that day. No destination, no plan. Just step after step, letting my thoughts catch up with my body. For years I had imagined this moment. what I would say, how I would react, how I would feel. But reality was different. There was no dramatic victory, no sudden healing, just a deep awareness of how much time had passed, and how much had been lost. That night I sat alone in my apartment. The lights were off. The city glowed through the window. I replayed her words again and again. I chose myself. At least she was honest. But honesty doesn't erase consequences. For the first time since I was 14, I allowed myself to feel something I had buried for years, grief, not just for my childhood, but for the relationship that never existed, for the mother I needed, but never had. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling. Strength. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that comes when you realize something important. I was no longer waiting for her approval. I didn't need her regret. I didn't even need her apology, because the power had shifted. And she knew it. Over the next few weeks, she tried to stay in touch. Short messages, careful words, no demands, just updates about her health, about how much the meeting had meant to her. I replied sometimes, briefly, respectfully, but with distance, because closeness had to be earned, and trust was expensive now. During this time, my own life was changing too. Work was demanding more from me. I was being considered for a leadership role, a big one. The kind of position that comes with responsibility and visibility. Years earlier, I would have doubted myself. I would have wondered if I was ready. But now, doubt felt unfamiliar. Because I had already survived worse. One afternoon, as I sat in a meeting room listening to people discuss my future, I realized something ironic. The same strength my mother once rejected was now the reason people trusted me. She had called me difficult, unmanageable, too much. But those same traits had kept me alive. When I got the promotion, I didn't celebrate. I didn't post about it. I didn't call anyone. I just sat quietly and let it sink in. Later that evening, I received a message from her. "I heard you're doing well," she wrote. "I'm proud of you." That word, proud. It felt strange, almost out of place. I stared at the screen for a long time. That was the first time she had ever said it, and yet, it didn't feel like it changed anything. I replied simply, "Thank you." Nothing more, nothing less. As months passed, her health declined. She didn't say it directly, but I could read between the lines. Doctor visits, treatments, fatigue. Then one day, she asked something I had been expecting. "Would you come with me to an appointment?" she wrote. I didn't answer right away. That question carried weight. It wasn't just about an appointment. It was about presence, about care, about stepping into a role I had been forced out of long ago. I asked myself something important. Was I doing this for her, or for myself? The answer surprised me. I would go, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. The day I walked into the hospital with her, I felt the past brushing against my shoulder. The long halls, the quiet voices, the waiting. She looked fragile, smaller than before, and for a moment I saw not the woman who had shut the door, but a person shaped by fear and poor choices. We sat side by side, not close, but not distant either. She reached for my hand, paused, then pulled back. "I won't cross lines," she said softly. I appreciated that. During the appointment, I stayed quiet. I listened. I observed. I supported without surrendering myself. Afterward, she thanked me. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just sincerely. That was when something inside me finally settled. I realized something important. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and compassion doesn't mean surrender. I could show kindness without reopening wounds. I could be present without reliving pain. That balance was my victory. Later that night, she asked me something that caught me off guard. If I hadn't gotten sick, she said, "Do you think I would have reached out?" I thought carefully, before answering. "I don't know," I said. "But I think the fear forced you to look back." She nodded. "I think so too. That honesty mattered. Because growth doesn't come from denial. It comes from facing yourself." Weeks later, she asked another question, one I had dreaded. "Do you think we could be a family again?" The room felt heavy, because that word meant different things to each of us. I didn't answer right away. I looked at her, at the lines on her face, at the fear in her eyes. I don't know what that looks like, I said finally. But I won't pretend the past didn't happen. She nodded. I wouldn't expect you to. That was the moment I realized something. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about punishment. This was about boundaries. For years, she had all the power. She decided who stayed, who left, who mattered. Now, the power rested with me, and I didn't need to abuse it. I continued living my life. My work thrived. My confidence grew. I built relationships slowly, carefully. And my mother, she learned something she never had before, what it feels like to wait. She waited for messages, for visits, for reassurance. And I gave what I could, not what she wanted, but what I was able to give. One evening she said something quietly. I understand now, she said, what it felt like for you. I looked at her, and for the first time, I believed her, because she wasn't asking for more. She wasn't demanding forgiveness. She was accepting the limits. That's when I knew. The final chapter was coming. Because life doesn't bring people back together without asking one last question. Would I hold on to the pain, or would I choose a future that wasn't controlled by it? The answer would change everything. There comes a moment in life when the past stops chasing you, and instead stands in front of you, not to hurt you, not to beg, but to ask one final question. For me, that moment arrived quietly. No drama, no warning, just a simple realization that surprised me one evening as I sat alone. I was no longer angry, and somehow that scared me more than rage ever did. Anger gives you direction, it gives you fuel, it tells you who you are fighting against. But when anger fades, you are left with a harder task. You have to decide who you want to be. My mother's health continued to decline. She never exaggerated it. She never asked for sympathy. She just shared facts. Doctor visits, treatments, long days, and sometimes short nights. She didn't complain. And that, strangely, made it harder. I visited occasionally, not often, but enough to show I hadn't disappeared. Each visit felt different, less tense, more honest, still cautious, but real. One afternoon as we sat in her small living room, she asked me something I had been avoiding. Do you think, she said softly, that you could ever forgive me? The question didn't feel like pressure. It felt like surrender. I didn't answer right away. Because forgiveness is not a word you rush. It's not something you give to be kind. It's something you choose. Only when you're ready to live with it. I don't know, I said honestly, but I'm not angry anymore. She nodded slowly. That might be more than I deserve, she said. I thought about that later. Was it more than she deserved? Or was it exactly what I deserved? I began to understand something important. Forgiveness is not a gift you give someone else. It's a weight you decide to put down. But putting it down doesn't mean pretending it was never heavy. I thought about my 14-year-old self, standing in the cold, carrying a bag too small for a life that was about to get too big. I asked myself a difficult question. If I forgave her, would I be betraying that child? The answer wasn't simple, but slowly something became clear. Honoring that child didn't mean staying angry forever. It meant never allowing what happened to happen again. Boundaries. That was the word that kept coming back to me. I could forgive her, without giving her control. I could care, without becoming vulnerable in ways that hurt me. That realization changed everything. One evening she asked if I would have dinner with her, at her place. Just us, no doctors, no serious conversations, just a meal. I hesitated. Then I said yes. The dinner was simple, nothing fancy. She cooked quietly. I set the table. It felt unfamiliar, awkward, but not painful. At one point, she stopped and looked at me. You've become someone strong, she said. Not because of me, in spite of me. I appreciated that she didn't try to take credit. That mattered. After dinner, we sat in silence, not uncomfortable silence, reflective silence. Then she said something that surprised me. I don't want you to feel responsible for me, she said. My mistakes are mine. My future is mine. I looked at her carefully. She wasn't asking for care, she was releasing me from obligation. That was the moment I made my decision. "I forgive you," I said quietly. Her breath caught, tears filled her eyes, but she didn't celebrate. She didn't reach for me, she just nodded. "Thank you," she said. But I continued. "Forgiveness doesn't mean we pretend the past didn't happen," I said, "and it doesn't mean we become something we're not." She nodded again. "I understand." And for the first time, I believed her without hesitation. Forgiveness didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel emotional. It felt calm. Like closing a door gently, not to lock someone out, but to protect what's inside. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. I felt lighter, not happier, just lighter. The memories didn't disappear, but they no longer controlled me. They became part of my story, not the definition of it. I realized something else too. Revenge isn't always about hurting someone. Sometimes revenge is refusing to become bitter. I continued to live my life, work, friends, plans, and occasionally, my mother. We didn't pretend to be a perfect family. We didn't force closeness. We allowed things to exist as they were, imperfect, limited, real. One day, she asked me something unexpected. "If you ever have children," she said, "what would you do differently?" I didn't hesitate. I would never make them feel disposable. She closed her eyes. "That's where I failed," she whispered. But this time, I didn't feel anger, just understanding. Because understanding doesn't excuse. It explains. I realized that her biggest punishment was not losing me. It was living with the knowledge that she could never undo what she did. And my biggest victory was not success. It was choice. I chose how close we were. I chose what I gave. I chose who I became. That was real power. As her health worsened, I stayed present, not out of guilt, not out of duty, but out of clarity. I no longer needed anything from her, and that made everything else possible. One night, as I was leaving her place, she said something softly. "You didn't destroy me," she said. "You showed me myself." I paused, then replied, "I didn't come back to punish you," I said. "I came back to free myself." She smiled sadly. "I see that now." Walking home that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not perfect, not complete, but real. And I knew the story was almost over. Because the final chapter isn't about her. It's about what this journey taught me, and what it might teach you. After forgiveness, life doesn't suddenly become beautiful. That's something people don't tell you. They talk about forgiveness like it's a finish line. Like once you cross it, everything makes sense. But forgiveness isn't an ending. It's a clearing. And what comes after is something much quieter. The weeks after I forgave, my mother felt strange. Nothing dramatic changed. No music swelled. No weight vanished overnight. But the constant tension I had lived with for years, that low, invisible pressure in my chest, was gone. I didn't notice it at first. It showed up in small ways. I slept better. I laughed without catching myself. I stopped replaying old conversations in my head. The past was still there, but it no longer demanded my attention every moment. I began to see my life more clearly, not as a reaction to what had happened to me, but as something I was actively choosing. For years I had built everything as a defense. Work was a shield, success was armor, independence was survival. Now, for the first time, I asked myself a new question. What do I want when I'm not running from something? That question scared me, because pain had been my motivation for so long that I didn't know who I was without it. I slowed down. At work, I stopped trying to prove myself every minute. I started saying no. I trusted that I didn't need to earn my place anymore. People noticed. They said I seemed calmer, more grounded. I also started letting people in, carefully. Not everyone, but a few. I shared pieces of my story, not the dramatic parts, but the honest ones, and instead of pity, I received something unexpected: respect. I realized that strength isn't about how much you can endure. It's about how much truth you're willing to face. My relationship with my mother remained quiet. We spoke occasionally, sometimes about serious things, sometimes about nothing at all. We didn't force connection. We allowed it to exist naturally. One afternoon, she said something that stayed with me. I wish I had known then what I know now. I didn't respond right away. Then I said, I wish you had known too. There was no bitterness in my voice, just reality. Her health continued to decline, and with it came moments of reflection. She spoke more openly, about fear, about regret, about the cost of choosing comfort over responsibility. She never asked me to fix anything, and that mattered. One evening she looked at me and said, I see now that the night I closed the door, I closed it on myself too. That was the first time. I felt true compassion for her, not because she was suffering, but because she finally understood. I didn't rush to comfort her. I didn't need to. Understanding was enough. As time passed, I noticed something else. I had stopped defining myself by what I survived. I was no longer the kid who was thrown out. I was just me. That realization changed how I saw the world. I stopped assuming abandonment, stopped waiting for people to leave, stopped bracing for loss before it happened. And slowly trust returned. Not blindly, not recklessly, but carefully, with boundaries. One day, I caught myself doing something unexpected. I was planning a future that included happiness. Not just safety, happiness. That's when I understood something important. Healing isn't loud. It's subtle. It happens when you're not looking. I thought again about the idea of revenge, about justice, about what it really means to win. My mother had begged me once, not on her knees, not with words alone, but with vulnerability. And I realized something. The real shift in power was not when she reached out. It was when I stopped needing her to. She didn't beg because I demanded it. She begged because life finally made her face herself, and I didn't win by refusing her. I won by becoming someone who could choose without fear. There was no grand moment where I declared everything healed. No speech, no final confrontation, just acceptance. I accepted that my childhood was broken, that my mother failed me, that some wounds never disappear completely. But I also accepted something else, that broken beginnings do not mean broken endings. I began to see my story differently, not as a tragedy, but as a transformation. The night my mother threw me out, she believed she was ending a problem. What she didn't know was that she was beginning a journey, one that would change both of us. I don't excuse what she did. I never will. But I also refuse to let it define my entire life. Some people never get apologies. Some never get explanations. Some never get closure. I got something rare, not because I deserved it more than others, but because timing, fear, and life aligned, and I chose to use that moment wisely. If you're listening to this, and you've been abandoned, if someone who should have protected you walked away, know this: your worth was never determined by their failure. You don't need their regret to build your future. You don't need their apology to move forward. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is live well, not loudly, not to prove anything, but honestly. And sometimes the greatest justice is becoming someone who no longer needs it. The storm had passed, the noise had faded. What remained was quiet, and in that quiet, I finally felt whole. Some stories don't end with closure. They end with understanding. And sometimes, understanding is stronger than any ending you could imagine. My mother passed away quietly. No dramatic moment, no last confession, just a phone call one morning that came earlier than expected, and still too late to prepare for. I stood in my apartment holding the phone long after the call ended. The city outside continued as usual. Cars moved, people talked, life didn't pause. And that felt strange, because something final had just happened. I didn't cry right away. Grief doesn't always come as tears. Sometimes it comes as stillness. At the funeral, I stood at the back. Not hidden, just distant. People spoke about her kindness, her struggles, her strength. I listened, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to correct the story. Everyone carries their own version of the truth. I had mine, they had theirs, and neither erased the other. When it was over, I walked away alone. No dramatic exit, just a quiet goodbye. That night I sat by the window and thought about everything: the door closing, the years of silence, the apology that came late, the forgiveness that came carefully. I asked myself a question I had avoided. Did I regret forgiving her? The answer surprised me. No, forgiveness hadn't erased the pain, but it had given me something far more valuable: freedom. I was no longer carrying her choices with me. They belonged to her now, where they always should have been. In the days that followed, memories surfaced. Not just the bad ones, but small moments I had forgotten. Her laugh, the way she used to hum while cleaning, the meals we shared when life was simpler. I allowed those memories to exist, without letting them rewrite the truth. Both could be real. I realized something important. People are not one thing. They are many things, held together by time, fear, love, and mistakes. My mother was not a monster, but she was not the mother I needed. And both of those things can be true. At the same time, as weeks turned into months, I noticed something else. I wasn't afraid of becoming her. That fear had haunted me for years. But now, I understood something. We don't repeat cycles by accident. We repeat them when we refuse to look at them. I had looked. I had faced the pain. I had chosen differently. That was my real inheritance. People sometimes ask me how I managed to move forward. They expect a secret, a method, a moment. But the truth is simple. I stopped waiting for someone else to give my life meaning. I built it myself, piece by piece, not perfectly, but honestly. If there is one thing this journey taught me, it's this: abandonment doesn't define you. What you build after it does. My mother once believed that shutting a door would solve her problems. What she didn't understand was that doors don't erase responsibility. They just delay it. Years later, life brought that responsibility back to her. Not through revenge, not through punishment, but through reflection. And life brought me something too: perspective. I didn't win by becoming better than her. I won by becoming myself. I learned that strength is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly, in the choices you make, when no one is watching. I learned that justice isn't always about balance. Sometimes it's about growth. And I learned that family is not defined by blood alone. It's defined by consistency, by presence, by showing up, especially when it's hard. If you're listening to this, and your story feels unfinished, if someone who should have protected you walked away, know this: you are not behind, you are not broken, and you are not weak for still feeling the impact. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without bleeding. You don't owe anyone forgiveness. You don't owe anyone reconciliation. What you owe yourself is honesty. And if forgiveness comes, let it come on your terms, not theirs. My mother begged once, not for my love, not for my loyalty, but for a chance to be seen. And in seeing her clearly, I finally saw myself clearly too. This story isn't about revenge. It's about responsibility. It's about consequences. And it's about choice. The night I was thrown out at 14 felt like the end of everything. But it wasn't. It was the beginning of a life that no one else got to control. And that is the ending I choose to live with. Sometimes the people who hurt us never become who we needed them to be. But that doesn't mean we can't become who we were meant to be. Your past may explain you, but it does not own you.